Welcome to the Parapsychology Foundation Lyceum Presents Parapsychology Foundation Lyceum Forum Physical Mediumship. We started on October 15th, 2016. This presentation is called the Felix Experimental Group, Mixed Blessings of Mixed Mediumship. And our speaker for this session is Stephen E. Braude, an emeritus professor and former chair of philosophy from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. He's a past president of the Parapsychological Association, the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Scientific Exploration, and the recipient of numerous grants and awards, including a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the F.W.H. Myers Memorial Medal from the Society for Psychical Research. In addition to approximately 100 published articles, he's written 6 books: ESP and Psychokinesis, A Philosophical Examination, The Limits of Influence, Psychokinesis and the Philosophy of Science, First Person Plural, Multiple Personality and the Philosophy of Mind, Immortal Remains, The Evidence for Life After Death, The Gold Leaf Lady and Other Parapsychological Investigations, and his latest book, of course, is Crimes of Reason on Mind, Nature, and the Paranormal. And we will be putting up a link to the recording of that talk for the book expo that the Parapsychology Foundation had not too long ago. So you can wander over there and take a look at that presentation as well if you're interested. Okay, I'm going to move over to your PowerPoint, Stephen. You remember that you pick up your pointer if you need it from the left-hand icon bar. It's the very top arrow. You got it. And then to move the slides, of course, is that little right-facing arrow on the right-hand side of your slideshow. You see that?
I believe I do. Yes.
Lovely. Okay.
You can hear me?
Yeah, it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. So we're going to get out of your way, and the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back in webinar land. And thank you all, those of you who've subscribed or logged on, for being here. Let's get moving. I'm going to talk to you about my investigations of the Felix Circle in Germany. I'll go through the basics and the initial investigations pretty quickly to get down to more recent and substantive material. The Felix Group was founded in 2004. Originally, it just had to do with table tilting. The main characters in the drama are Kai Muegge, who's the medium, and Jochen Soderling, that's a pseudonym, who's the former circle leader. Both Kai and Jochen are very knowledgeable about and also immersed in the old spiritualist literature, really, if not mind-bogglingly uncritical. Yeah.
Right now his signal is very poor. He may not even notice that that's the case. And I will drop him an email, I think, really quickly. I don't think I have a phone number. There you are. Stephen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your internet connection is not doing very well. So what I'm going to do, we've missed probably the last minute and a half of what you were saying. What I'm going to do is ask you to shut off your video camera, because that will probably help with the bandwidth you've got over there. It's the same as the microphone. You go above your head to the little camera, click on that, and then click on the dialog box and click it off. Okay, and then go ahead and give it a try speaking. Let's see if you can we hear you?
Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Hopefully this will work. Okay, go ahead. I'll get out of your way again.
It's better not to see me anyway. Well, I forget where I left off, but I'll just say again, Kai and Jochen are the two main participants in this drama. Jochen is a respected cardiologist in Germany, goes by the pseudonym Jochen Soderling. Both Kai and Jochen know a great deal about the parapsychological spiritualist literature, both the data and also the theoretical and critical literature. Jochen joined the group in 2007. Kai's wife, Julia, became a regular sitter in 2011 and eventually took over the role of circle leader. So we can move on from there. Kai conducts two kinds of seances, both table sittings and cabinet seances. During the cabinet seances, Kai is seemingly entranced and ostensibly possessed by the spirit of the late parapsychologist Hans Bender, who's Kai's usual control. And Hans Bender is often assisted by additional spirit helpers known as the chemists. When Kai does a table sitting, he's not in a trance. Initially, Kai purported to be agnostic about the genuineness of the Hans Bender persona. More recently, he's changed his tune. He's at least overtly adopted a conventionally spiritist interpretation. My guess is that this has to do with Julia's influence, and maybe also in response to recent allegations of fraud, which I'll talk about, and which I believe forced Kai to retreat to his uncritical base of proponents, for whom conventionally spiritist interpretation would be appropriate. It's too bad now you can't see my dramatic hand gestures, but you'll have to do without those. My initial investigation of the Felix group was in 2010, and I was working with Peter Mulasch from Vienna. We had some interesting phenomena, but not under any kind of decent controls. During a cabinet seance, the sitters experienced rappings of various kinds around the room and anomalous object movements of various kinds with no experiment or controls. And at a table seance in darkness, infrared camcorders recorded vigorous table movements, and also a brief table levitation apparently occurred, but when the cameras were turned off. Kai and Jochen were concerned at the time that outside investigators in the use of camcorders would reduce or suppress the phenomena, which is not a crazy thing to suggest, and Peter and I appreciated that. But we agreed that a follow-up investigation under serious controls was warranted, and Kai said he would cooperate. So I returned to Germany in August of 2012, this time assisted in two of the three seances I conducted by videographer Robert Narholz, who's producing a documentary on PK. And then in May of 2013, we conducted 4 more seances that took place at Robert's Austrian farmhouse. This is the standard location in Hanau, Germany of the Felix Circle. This is Kai's parents' house. It was built in 1926, and the seances are held in the cellar slash air raid shelter in the basement. This was the original setup in the basement. This curtained off area here just separated the sitting area from where Kai kept his computer and all his associated computer gear. That has since been removed, and the room is completely bare except for the cabinet and chairs and table. That arrow in the center points to a black strip of tape on the floor, which for Kai marks the standard end of the PK boundary, as he puts it, beyond which he doesn't go when he emerges from the cabinet while controlled by Hans Bender. He uses that, since the sittings take place in darkness, he uses that as, there's a pencil underneath that so he can feel where he is with his feet. Some have alleged that there's something suspicious about that, but I've examined it. I've never found anything suspicious about the black strip. This is what the other end of the seance room looked like for a cabinet seance. And you can see here the curtained off area where Kai's computer gear is stashed. This is the kind of plastic picnic table that Kai uses for his usual table seance. Characters here, this is Kai's mother Elke, Kai's wife Julia, Kai himself, and some devastatingly handsome guy who is unidentified. So, at the 2012 seances, On August 22nd, we had 5 table levitations. 2 of them were in darkness, but the others were in varying degrees of red light. And the red light was good enough to see hands on the table and feet on the floor. For one of those levitations, number 3, in red light, the table rose slowly and gently, about 18 inches, and remained aloft for 2 to 3 seconds. What was impressive about it is that the tabletop remained level. The table movement was smooth. The table felt weightless and buoyant and never felt as if it was being pushed upwards. I don't know why the end of that sentence ends with a comma. I guess for dramatic effect, there's more to follow. A couple days later, August 24th, we had a cabinet seance. I'm going to describe this because it was typical of many seances that Kai gave for a period of time. Kai's standard procedure now has been augmented by lots of apports of jewelry that comes from his mouth or his eye. Anyway, at the cabinet seance on August 24th, there were 12 sitters. Before the seance, there was a very careful examination we conducted of the cellar and the cabinet. I conducted a strip search of Kai, not a full cavity search. But a careful strip search, and also a careful examination of Kai's fresh clothes, which we put him in, and a constant monitoring of Kai as he walked from his room to the cellar where the seance was being conducted. I sat immediately to Kai's left, and my control was this. My right foot and my leg was in constant contact with Kai's left foot and leg. And during many phenomena that occurred at the far end of the circle, I held Kai's left hand with my right hand. And on some of those occasions, when HB permitted it, I also reached across Kai's body to hold Julia's hands. Sometimes I could feel Kai's right hand underneath that. But in any case, when phenomena were happening across the room from Kai, I was basically draped all over Kai on those conditions. And so I could feel what was going on pretty much with his body at all time. The other sitters claimed to be joining hands. I couldn't confirm that because the room was dark. What was interesting about this was that Kai's body often twitched or his hand clenched in mine just prior to or simultaneous with the occurrence of phenomena, most of which were well beyond Kai's reach. I never felt that there was any kind of contrivance that Kai had, that he was using at the time. The phenomena that occurred at a distance from Kai, these were raps and scratching sounds on the wall and ceiling, moving rapidly around, various kinds of touches to people at the far end of the circle, lights moving around the room, some of them behind me, in a location where Kai and no one else could have been standing. Object movements on or near the drum at the end of the room, and shadows on the luminescent plaque that Kai had there. And then after a brief rest inside the cabinet, Kai displayed ectoplasm for us in periods of red light. These alternated with periods of darkness, ostensibly for Kai to recharge, as it were. And then Kai pulled large quantities of material from his mouth, ectoplasm, which landed in a lump on the floor in front of the cabinet. Later I'll show you photos. The mass on the floor was interesting. It seemed to breathe in and out as if it was animated from within. I could view this very clearly from 2 to 3 feet away. And then when the red light periods occurred again, we saw, first of all, a small animated hand sprouting on an arm, 12 to 18 inches long, and the hand turned left and right, looking a little bit like the head of a cobra. And then the next red light period revealed a 3 or 4 foot long protrusion like a column rising from the mass, and Kai passed his hand back and forth over the column to show that nothing was pulling it from above. And then in the next period, material looking like a fine netting or cocoon covered Kai's legs and part of his torso. That's pretty much standard procedure for a couple of years for Kai's seances, his cabinet seances. The fact that it's his standard procedure is, for many people, something that generates some suspicion about why Kai does the same thing time after time. On August 25th, this was interesting. We held an impromptu sitting. We were very tired from the late seance the night before. The impromptu sitting was held in total darkness, but Kai felt cheered and buoyant from the seance the night before, and he felt it was worth giving it a shot. And in that totally dark seance, we had infrared video of a full table levitation. Now, unfortunately, much of the view was obstructed by Kai's body. He was not comfortable in his chair, and in the darkness he moved into a position where he blocked much of the view of the table. So you can't see Kai's mother, Elke, on the left. It's unlikely that she lifted the table, and Kai couldn't have done so with one hand because he had only one hand on the table, and he was moving his other hand up and down, simulating what Eusapia Palladino used to do when she made tables rise. And the table couldn't have been raised by Kai's knees in the positions shown. Now, I regard this as important, not because it's a great video of a table levitation, but because it seems to show, contrary to what Kai often claims, that tables can levitate under IR illumination. Some of you may have seen this video online. Kai posted it. Let's try to look at it and see if we can get it to go. Is this going to run, Nan?
It doesn't seem to be live. If you have the link to the YouTube video, we can put it in the chat and people can run it.
I don't right offhand, but if you go to the Felix Group website, you can see it. Anyway.
The Felix Group website. Okay, I'll get it for you and stick it in the chat.
More important than these sessions back in Hanau were the Austria sessions that followed these in May of 2013. The idea was to improve controls further and to get better video documentation. So Robert Narholz and I arranged for a week-long meeting at his private farmhouse outside Salzburg. Here the sitters were myself, Robert Narholz, biologist and parapsychologist Michael Nahm, Kai and Julia, and Jochen and his wife Anna. These were all people that Kai felt very comfortable with, and we thought this would be a very congenial group, and we'd be able to control the situation much better than we could in Hanau. This is Robert's farmhouse. Lots of bedrooms, so everybody could be easily accommodated in the house. This is the view from Robert's farmhouse. I have no real good reason to show you this except to make you envious. So here are the general precautions we were able to take against fraud. First of all, the seance room was kept padlocked when it wasn't in use. I was the only one who had the key to the room, and no one knew where I kept the key when it wasn't on my person. The windows and the interior shutters each had locks. During the sessions, the room was padlocked from the inside, and the cabinet assembly, the PK target objects, and other objects were examined carefully before and after the seances. And all these inspections were documented on video in case anyone were to doubt the thoroughness of them. This is the door to the seance room. You can see the little padlock there. It's not very sturdy, but it was noisy, which was the point. This was the arrangement for the table seances. You can see how bare the room was. No real good hiding places for any accessories. This was the arrangement for the cabinet seance. It was Kai's cabinet, but we investigated it very carefully. These were the inside locks at the top of the seance room windows. Those were the bottom locks. And the shutters also had locks. I think it's safe to say no one got in or out of the room undetected. On May 11th, we had several full table levitations, each of them 3 to 4 seconds long, and the table rose about 2 feet high. Unfortunately, none of those were captured on video. We also had 2 apports. I don't make any extraordinary claims for these, but I'll just mention what they were. For apport number 1, Kai's hands and legs were controlled throughout. Kai asked Julia, who was seated across from him, to shine a flashlight in his mouth. We saw Kai stick out his tongue, wiggle it, and a 1 3/4 inch crystal fell out. Before this, Kai had been talking normally. More impressive, I think, was apport number 2. At Jochen's suggestion, he noted that Kai often has inspirational objects placed in the seance room, and sometimes the apports that Kai produces are singularly appropriate, we were told, to the inspirational objects. So I had some samples with me of foil for my case of the gold leaf lady, some of this golden colored foil made out of brass, which nobody there had ever seen before, and which I'd shown Kai just a couple hours before the seance. And I placed some of those samples in the seance room to be inspirational objects, and Kai said he was going to try to assemble something similarly metallic. And in red light, we clearly saw Kai's right bare arm and hand with his fingers spread. Jochen examined the hand and arm very carefully. I controlled Kai's left leg in his hand. And suddenly, it's not clear from where, a 3/4 inch copper nugget landed forcibly on the table. Now, what's interesting about this is that Kai didn't have any advanced time to prepare something singularly appropriate for the brass foil. And the copper nugget seemed not exactly the same, but its connection with the foil was apparent and certainly interesting. I make no other claims to that, but I think it's unlikely that Kai would have had any opportunity to come up with something from his stash of objects that he brought with him that would be so singularly appropriate to the brass foil. But who knows? This is what the crystal and the copper nugget looked like. I discussed this in more detail in my first report on the Felix Group in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. So if you want to know more, you can look there. On May 12th, we had several full table levitations, and one of them was captured on video in red light, which was turned on as the table began to rise. The video was recorded with a very high exposure index and a slow shutter speed on a wide open lens. Digital enhancement allowed the action and the controls to be seen quite clearly. Now, Kai's feet and those of most of the others were clearly visible on the floor, and Sitter's hands, but not all thumbs, were clearly visible on top of the table. I can't show you the video. What I can do, though, is to show you slides from the video, and it'll give you some idea. So let's go through these. Now, I'll just point out, here's Kai. You can see his right hand there. You can barely see his left hand, but my hand there is resting on Kai's. I could feel Kai's right thumb. You can't see it, but I could feel it. So let's go through these. Now these load a little more slowly than I'd like. Here you get an even better look. Actually, Kai's thumb is on top of mine there. So it seems. If this moved more slowly, I'd go back and forth so you could get the idea, but that'll have to wait another time. Then we had a cabinet seance. Now, again, we inspected the room several times. The last time was just a few minutes before the strip search was conducted. So we looked at the seance room one more time, relocked the room. Then I strip searched Kai again, looked at his shoes and his clothing, the usual procedure. Then I followed Kai to the seance room. He had his arms raised as usual. His hands were in full view the whole time. And Kai had been drinking a large quantity of black tea right before this. You'll see the significance of that later. Then we unlocked the seance room. We placed Kai in the cabinet. The other sitters were patted down before they entered the room. Julia was strip searched by Jochen's wife, Anna. HB, to our disappointment, announced that there would be no object movements before seeing the ectoplasm. The idea was to save energy, Kai said, or HB said, for the ectoplasm. And under red light, video captured Kai extruding a large quantity of ectoplasm pulled from his mouth, and eventually showing the separation in the structure of the material. I sat immediately to Kai's left again. It's worth noting that there was no odor from the ectoplasm, no evidence of the black tea or the recent meal that Kai had had. Makes it difficult to sustain the regurgitation hypothesis. And then after a period of darkness again, Kai retreated into the cabinet. We were next shown a glowing green ectoplasm, which Kai spread apart, moved around, and brought within 2 inches of my face. The light was too dim for video of that. We made several attempts to record the mass of the material on the floor, ostensibly breathing or flexing. The video wasn't great, but it did show the mass apparently moving. And then lastly, Kai revealed himself covered again from head to toe by a netting or cocoon of ectoplasm, recorded in very dim video. Then the seance ended. I remained behind to examine Kai and the cabinet and so on. When Kai left to go back to his room, Jochen strip searched Kai again. Nothing was found. All right, I'm going to show you some slides of Kai extruding the ectoplasm. Again, this probably will not load fast enough for you to get the sense of movement, but let's go through it. There you can start to see the structure of the material. This is the crew, Jochen and Anna. Their faces are blurry because that's how they actually look. That's Michael Nahm, Kai, Robert, Julia, and again, this devastatingly handsome guy. I don't know who he is. So let's move on to recent developments, which in some respects are more interesting still. Hold on, water time. Excuse me. In volume 28, number 2 of the JSE, Michael Nahm presented a compelling circumstantial case for fraud in connection with some light phenomena and some ectoplasmic manifestations. The suspicious light phenomena in question closely resemble what magicians produce by means of a device called the delight flight. And this device uses an LED light attached to a thin wire, which is controlled with a thumb. And these phenomena had always struck some observers, including Jochen, as suspicious, and also quite different from other lights which occurred at a distance from Kai. And in fact, Kai had asked Jochen, in retrospect, not very wisely, to take photos of these mysterious and unimpressive light phenomena. And a sequence of photos taken by Jochen, it turns out, made the trick quite obvious. The photos that I'm going to show you next are enhanced to show the relevant details. And what I want you to look at is the movement of Kai's right thumb, which moves along with the light in his left hand. Now, the seance room was actually much darker than the photos suggest. So take a look at this. So keep your eye on Kai's right thumb. The light is there. Kai's thumb will raise as the light goes up. We'll go back the other direction so you can see. Got it? So here's what happened. I had a conversation with Jochen about this when the suspicion started to emerge. Excuse me. And I asked Jochen if he knew anything about whether Kai had cheated. And Jochen hemmed and hawed, apparently not sure what to say about it, which was very unusual. I mean, a simple yes or no would have done the trick. And I inferred from this that Kai had asked Jochen not to say anything. It sworn him to silence. And so I spoke to Kai shortly thereafter and said that I now knew that he had cheated. And Kai, unlike all previous Skype video conversations we'd had, couldn't look me in the eye. He apologized over and over and over, never actually admitting that he'd cheated, but saying to me that, you know, there's a difference between demonstrations for the public and scientific experiments. I took that to be a tacit confession, and I still believe it was a tacit confession. And soon after that, Jochen informed me that he had in fact discovered a magic trick like the Delight Flight in Kai's travel bag back in these earlier seances, and that when he confronted Kai about this, Kai actually confessed to having cheated on occasion, and had indeed asked him not to say anything. So obviously this casts a shadow over the case generally, and it shows that at least sometimes Kai only pretended to be in a trance in which he was unaware of what transpired. Kai usually says that when he's doing a cabinet seance, his waking consciousness is completely overtaken by the consciousness of Hans Bender, and he has no idea what goes on during the seance. So this suggests that that's not always the case. For example, Kai admitted to Jochen that he'd actually hidden the Delight-type device on shelves behind the cabinet in these earlier seances in Koblenz. Now notice, that had to have happened before the seance began. It was conscious preparation for a trick. We also know that Kai purchased both luminous green and non-luminous Halloween-style cobweb, and in quite large quantities, 1 kilogram of it, much larger than would have been needed just to determine, as Kai now claims, how closely the cobweb resembles the ectoplasm appearing in his cabinet seances. In fact, Kai made, but never posted, a video that he showed me of some of his luminous cobweb, in which he claims it's unlike what appears during his seances. Kai was claiming around this time that he had heard about suspicions concerning his use of the cobweb in 2012, and he seems to say that he produced this video clip at that time in 2012. The problem with that is that we know that Kai purchased the 1 kilogram of non-luminous cobweb and a smaller amount of luminous cobweb in late 2013. Now, I have to say that it's true that a great deal of the non-luminous ectoplasm I've seen looks more cloth-like and less synthetic than what Kai displays in his video. But Kai's luminous cobweb looks exactly like the green material displayed in Austria. And besides, how would Kai know how similar the cobweb and ectoplasm are if he's in a non-conscious trance during production of the ectoplasm? I also have to note that Nam had purchased different kinds of cobweb from the same vendor Kai used. They don't all look the same, and they also look different from the material that Kai displayed in his video. It also doesn't help Kai's credibility that when Nam asked him if he'd ever seen the Halloween cobweb, Kai denied all knowledge of it. And also, prior to the allegations of fraud, Kai never mentioned his tests of the fake ectoplasm to either Jochen, Nam, or to me. I have to say that there is no smoking gun indicating that Kai smuggled any cobweb into the Austrian seance room, nor is there a good idea how the material escaped our controls. But the problem is that in light of Kai's clear cheating on some occasions, this doesn't look good. But I do want to speculate about what went on during Austria. See, most of the moving light phenomena I've observed are different from what can be produced by means of a device like the Delight Flight. It's important to note that. And it's obviously invalid to argue that since some of Kai's phenomena are fraudulent, all of Kai's phenomena are fraudulent. That would be as stupid as arguing some money is counterfeit, therefore all money is counterfeit. And we do know that some of the strongest cases of physical mediumship, like that of Eusapia Palladino, are cases of mixed mediumship. The thing, though, is that in those strong cases, the phenomena were produced under even better controls than we were able to impose in Austria. However, considering my strip search and the other controls, there are important questions that remain that are, to my mind, not satisfactorily answered yet. For example, where did the Austrian ectoplasm come from? Why did I find no traces of it after the seance, or before the seance during the strip search? Could Kai have hidden it in his rectum or his gut? If the Austrian cabinet manifestations were all fraudulent, Kai would have needed to stash more than 2 kinds of fake ectoplasm, and also light-producing devices, because there was light that went on inside the cabinet, bright green light from inside the cabinet, presumably hiding them in an orifice of some kind, either fore or aft. Now, the thing is, there are some good reasons for taking the rectum hypothesis seriously. First of all, drug mules often use the rectum as a hiding place, and this is something Kai certainly knows from his immersion as a filmmaker in the Frankfurt drug scene. Kai produced 3 documentaries about heroin drug use in Frankfurt. Also, some mediums have actually been known to stash material in their rectum, the most notorious of which is the Hungarian medium Ladislaus Laszlo. And Laszlo conducted cabinet sittings in a way that facilitated cheating, and Kai's cabinet seances suffer from the identical lack of control. Eric Dingwall commented on the enormous importance of the hand control in the case of Laszlo. He said if the hands are held, then the arrangement of the products, that is ectoplasm, become a matter of some difficulty. Laszlo's hands were sometimes held and sometimes not. Often the hands were free behind the curtains between the appearance of different phenomena. And that's true of Kai as well. Similarly, Kai spends considerable time behind closed curtains in darkness before and between phenomena. And during those periods, sitters usually hear noises coming from the cabinet, and those noises could easily be interpreted as Kai retrieving products from previously unexamined or undetected locations. For those of you who want references to the Laszlo case, here they are. I assume you can check these out later. I also have to note that practitioners of a yogic system cleansing method called Dowdy swallow large amounts of cotton sheeting and keep it in their stomach for between 5 and 20 minutes. So could that help explain where the ectoplasm came from? The problem is that Dowdy practitioners are warned against swallowing synthetic material, which the cobweb would be, and they're also warned against drinking after ingesting the cotton. So it seems relevant that I watched Kai drink a large quantity of black iced tea just before leaving the strip search for the seance room. On the other hand, if Kai learned about the delight flight, we have to be open to the possibility that he learned other tricks as well. And it has to be noted that Kai gives seances, that is, public demonstrations, with considerable frequency, and he seldom has a failure or a negative seance in which no or almost no phenomena occur. And that's quite remarkable, especially for a medium who originally claimed to be less prodigious than the greatest past mediums, all of whom had many negative seances. And I think it would be remarkable for Kai, given his usual exhaustion from traveling and lack of sleep. And we have to note that Kai had a largely negative 4th seance in Austria, ostensibly because he was worn out by the previous 3 seances. Now, in Kai's favor, I have to note that if he was nothing but a cheat, he could have used the darkness of the 4th Austrian seance to levitate a table, but he didn't. So the important point to get out of this is that nothing learned so far about Kai's cheating justifies, in my opinion, discounting either his table levitations or the object movements occurring at a distance from Kai while he's under 4-limb bodily control. But I do believe that current suspicions reinforce the need for imposing even tighter controls for cabinet seances. After the Austrian seances were over, I proposed to Kai that we meet again in Austria to impose even tighter, but not necessarily heroic controls. I suggested that the investigator supply the cabinet. Kai said he was open to that. I suggested putting him in a one-piece jumpsuit. He said he'd consider seriously doing that. Then I suggested even better, putting his hands in sealed boxing gloves, which was a technique used in the Australian Charles Bailey case. Kai never did agree to that. That would have made it very difficult to sustain the rectum hypothesis if Kai was able to produce ectoplasm under other controls. I also suggested that he drink blueberry syrup or juice like Eva C. did. Kai never weighed in on that one way or the other. I don't think there's any need to insist on Kai swallowing an emetic like Eva C. did or submitting to a full cavity search. Or if the latter, then someone other than me is going to have to do it. My philosophical training doesn't really prepare me for that. Unfortunately, Kai never agreed to another Austrian meeting. He said it was so traumatic for him there before, he couldn't do it again in Austria. But he did agree to seances again in Hanau in October of 2015. I wasn't happy about meeting in Hanau again, and I report on this in JSE again in volume 30, number 1. We did get some dramatic table levitations. I mean, very dramatic. The table was raised a couple feet, and for about 20 seconds, it would sway back and forth in keeping with the rhythm of the music. I thought it was pretty cool. We also had some other intriguing phenomena, which I describe in detail in the JSE. Unfortunately, none of these were recorded in video. So I would overall have to treat the October 2015 seances in Hanau as a bust, since the object was to get even better video recording of table levitations. The recent JSE paper also contains a statement from Jochen describing in detail how he uncovered Kai's cheating with the Delight-type device and how Kai admitted to having cheated. So, to sum up, where do I now stand on the Felix group? Here's the view from Mount Olympus. I think we can say that Kai should be considered at best a mixed medium. In my view, I still maintain that some of his phenomena are not yet adequately explained away or directly challenged by recent revelations of cheating. I still believe that the table levitations, many of them at least, are genuine, and that many of the object movements at a distance from Kai under four-limb control are probably genuine. However, the controls Kai has permitted still fall short of the gold standard for this type of investigation. Nothing as good as what we have, for example, in the 1908 Naples sittings with Palladino. So for those of you who want references, these are the articles by Nam and me in 2014 and 2016. This is the sleazy promotional part of the talk. For those of you who want to know more about what I've had to say about macro PK, you can look at the limits of influence. Also the gold leaf lady. This is my latest, Crimes of Reason. I also have more to say about macro PK in this. If you want to know more about me, the best place to find it probably is my whimsical website, jazzphilosopher.com. I have a university website, but unless you're a URL savant, you'll never remember what that website is. So, there we go. Nan, I turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Steve. Very, very nice and very perplexing, in a good way, presentation about this modern physical mediumship experience. Anybody have any questions? Please write them into the chat. Walter is saying, I was convinced of a complete table levitation observed in Hanau and tend to believe that the flight of the trumpet over our heads was genuine. We were seated well away from Kai. Have you observed flight of trumpets with Kai that you consider genuinely paranormal?
I experienced trumpet phenomena early on with Kai as well, but he was under no control whatsoever. My concern about that is that there are those, including Peter Mulash, who've claim to feel things in the darkness, which they interpreted as devices held by Kai and used by Kai to make objects move. I don't know how much credibility to give those reports. I'd be more impressed if the trumpet was moving while I or someone else held Kai under four-limb control. If that happened during the seance you're referring to, then that would be interesting. But I definitely observed phenomena at a distance from Kai while I was controlling him, draped all over his body. And those I regard as very interesting and probably genuine.
Shirley is wondering, why is a cabinet in darkness required for physical mediumship?
Well, I don't believe it is required, but that's part of the myth that's grown up over the years. I mean, some of the great mediums didn't need it. Eusapia didn't need it. Hume didn't need it. Of course, he didn't use the cabinet. It's hard to just dismiss it as a vehicle for fraud, although it certainly can be used as one. It would be better if the cabinet were not used at all. But, you know, there are various kinds of folk beliefs that have grown up about what's necessary for these spiritualist or spiritist phenomena to occur. And it may be that if the medium sincerely believes that darkness is a precondition, then for that person, perhaps it is.
And that's interesting to bring in the psychological aspect of it as well.
Right.
That it could sincerely be something that the medium believes in, because they do, then they don't believe they can produce phenomena under conditions of life. Andrea is asking, or is suggesting, that it would be nice to make video with two cameras, one from the top showing the table and the hands clearly, and one from the bottom, so you've got two angles to go back and forth from.
I agree completely. Kai wouldn't let us use two cameras in Austria. He was allowing us to use two cameras. I mean, that was a plan for the subsequent Hanau experiments last October. But when we got right down to it, Kai was unhappy about the conditions that prevailed, and if you read the second JSE report that I wrote, you'll see what happened. But we had actually 3 cameras ready for that one, but we didn't get anything on video. We had a lot of good table levitations when the room was totally dark. When we turned on the cameras, we got a lot of interesting table movements, but no levitations.
Mm-hmm. Now, Margaret is suggesting infrared or all-spectrum cameras, and Bo also suggesting thermal cameras. But do you still have, well, say what your opinion is about those cameras, and then I was wondering if you still have access to investigating them.
I didn't hear you very well on that, but...
Oh, sorry. Oh, gosh. Wait a second. My mic is all the way on the other side of the table. Margaret and Bo were suggesting infrared or all-spectrum cameras or thermal cameras.
Yeah, Kai's not happy about that. I mean, I keep reminding him that we got a table levitation in infrared, so we know it can be done, but Kai claims that he thinks that nevertheless makes it less probable that it will happen, but I think it's still worth trying. He's never been happy about using thermal cameras, and that doesn't look good. I mean, especially given that we know he's cheated under some other conditions. So Kai really needs to man up here and do it right. But I don't think there's a chance in hell right now that Kai will work with me again. He's spreading various lies about what actually went on, about Jochen's revelations and so on. I think he's fearing for his career.
Sorry. Carlos is asking, who is investigating Kai now?
Nobody.
Anybody?
Nobody serious in any case. Kai's just retreated to his uncritical supporters.
We have a number of people who are typing. Oh, Rosemary is saying, I think the most damning thing about Kai is his refusal, often with the excuse that Hans Bender won't allow it, to submit to stringent methods.
Sure. I mean, there was a time when that might have been something that we could be more sympathetic about, or at least more open-minded. But I think as time goes on, it just looks worse and worse, especially since we know that Kai had to make conscious preparations for cheating with the delight type device, and that he was no doubt not his waking consciousness was present for the use of the delight device during those seances. And if he's not in a genuine trance at those times, who knows whether he is ever in a trance?
Yeah, exactly. It throws the whole thing into question. Cheryl Lee is making the comment that she knows from experience that it's best to just have the cameras there all the time because it becomes a normal part of the environment and doesn't impede the PK at all.
Yes, we tried that with Kai, and last October we conducted some sessions just with the cameras in the room, then with the cameras turned on but covered, then with the cameras open. Kai was such a pussy about the whole thing. It just...
Doug is saying, do you have plans to investigate any other mediums?
I've been investigating a non-medium in Buenos Aires, Ariel Farias, who makes tables rise, not levitate, in bright light, daylight, all kinds of conditions. He's a former poltergeist agent, and actually still occasional poltergeist agent. When he gets agitated, things have a tendency to fly off shelves. But he discovered in the context of a PK Spiritus Sitter group in Buenos Aires that he could do this. And so he's been developing and exploring that, and he's not a professional psychic. He's got a regular day gig. He's a family man. He's a good guy all around, and no suspicions about him whatsoever.
Yeah, Lynn was asking me if we saw her question or comment, and I didn't actually, so if you could put it, make sure you're typing with to all when you type into the chat box. Patrick, do you have any comments? I can open your mic or you can type into the chat. Rosemary is also asking, is your film of Ariel levitating the table online?
No, but I think there are some YouTube videos of Ariel doing this. So if you go onto YouTube, you should be able to find them. And actually, I think my colleagues in Buenos Aires have, in fact, posted one or two of my videos of Ariel. So you might find them, yeah.
That's good, that's good. Let me get back to the all frame. Andrea is asking, does Kai usually make public events? She's saying because Austria is near to Italy. I know Lisette has been to one of his ones that I think was held in New York and wasn't happy at all about how far away everyone was from where the action was actually happening.
Well, Kai's giving plenty of seances. There are plenty of people who are not even remotely critical and who think Kai is near to God. So he's giving seances all over Europe. I know some Australians are making it difficult for Kai because they're now starting to insist that at very least thermal cameras be used after the Gary Mannion fiasco.
For those folks who don't know about Gary Mannion, if you want to give us a quick description of what that is so they know what you're referring to. Gary
Mannion's a physical medium who, unbeknownst to him, he was conducting a seance while somebody had some thermal cameras, or what may have been infrared, now I can't recall, set up, and it showed him clearly cheating. And so he's been exposed as a fraud. And some Australian, I forget which group it is right now in Australia, has tightened their conditions for approving any further physical medium demonstrations in Australia. And Kai is so far balking at accepting their conditions, and their conditions include cameras running.
Yeah. Hiram from Maryland Paranormal says would be interesting to have force sensors above and below the table connected to data acquisition consoles I refer you to Carlos's lecture in week 1 materials about what was done to kind of measure what was happening with the table in Eusapia Palladino sittings back in the day. But has anybody ever tried to do that, or is that also in the realm of no possibility?
Well, not with Kai. We do that with Ariel. I mean, Ariel's sat on a scale, and the table itself has been on strain gauges as well. And so there's all sorts of detailed data about what happens with Ariel's weight. And this will be forthcoming in a report in the JSE that my colleagues in Buenos Aires and I are preparing.
Wonderful.
And there was a talk about that at the PA conference as well.
Sorry.
There was a talk about that at the PA conference.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Patrick is saying, did your chair ever get off the ground during a sitting? I've heard the kind of large crash on the wall, or heard the kind of large crash on the wall that Robert reported, and quite out of reach of Kai or any of the other suspects.
My chair never moved, but in the recent October seances in Hanau, there was a very large thwack from a drum well out of Kai's reach. The bell hanging from the ceiling behind me rang, even though no one, I'm quite sure, was there to touch it. So we had some very interesting phenomena, again, occurring at a distance from Kai, in which I'm inclined to believe are genuine. I think Kai is a good PK subject. I'm not nearly so convinced of the cabinet phenomena.
Lynn is commenting that she has sat in on Kai's physical mediumship seances and table seance, and she's happy to hear about your findings. She said afterwards she felt that he was not a physical medium, but the PK was happening. She did some research online the next day and found the JSE paper, and now she hears this from you, so it feels like this is a full circle moment for her.
That's right.
She also said she'd heard he has a circle of magician friends. Can you confirm this?
No, I can't confirm it, but I can certainly believe it. I mean, I don't know whether he did his research about the Delight Flight online or elsewhere, but yeah, I don't know. It's credible.
Okay. She's also saying, have you seen Warren Kaylor, Caylor, and if so, do you have any thoughts on his mediumship?
No, I haven't seen him, but what I've heard is not very impressive, and to my knowledge, he doesn't work under tight conditions either.
Okay. We have a number of people typing, so we'll wait and see what comes in next. I think it's got to be very frustrating to work with physical mediumship, because it seems to, I don't know if it's performance pressure or what it is, it seems to always have this other aspect to it. And maybe it's that mental mediumship brings across so many vague, kind-hearted messages in you that people take as being very evidential, but we wouldn't take as being very evidential. So maybe that's the analogy.
Well,
Rosemary is asking if there's more reports forthcoming on Ariel, and you said that there's the JSE coming?
Yeah, I'm working on a paper with my colleagues in Buenos Aires. I have yet to write my part of it, and I'm also working on converting their Spanglish into idiomatic English.
Not to worry, when we write in Spanish, people have to
Sure.
have to convert our English and Espanol as well, or Portuguese. Patrick is saying, so when is there ever such sitting phenomena without a mix of fraudulently produced artifacts and potentially or ostensibly paranormal phenomena, apart from Hume, presumably, and T.G. Hamilton, presumably, as Walter described in the reports of those sittings?
Well, you just cut out there.
Oh, sorry. If you look at the chat box...
I can see the...
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that generally. I mean, in the 1908 Naples sittings with Palladino, it's not clear that there was ever any fraudulent phenomena for those 11 seances. That would be my opinion about those. I don't know. I mean, it may be that Kluski never cheated either. I couldn't say. I think there are some really fantastic cases. It's understandable why mediums might resort to cheating, especially if it's their primary means of financial support. It's a tricky business. It's not for the faint-hearted or for people who don't have job security.
Yeah, exactly. Lynn is also saying she was agreeing with Walter, who said that Warren Kaler in Toronto was 100% fraudulent in 2007, and Lynn is agreeing with that and saying, I saw him and his control, Luther, singled me out to say I was a physical medium and to speak to Warren about it afterwards. Warren then asked me about who I lived with, how big my house was, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. So that didn't go well, it doesn't sound like.
Well, that's consistent with the kind of thing I've heard about Warren, but since it's all secondhand, I mean, that's as far as I can.
Yeah. So Patrick is reminding us he's referring to theoretical points from bachelor impetus induction, and that until there's a track record, nothing happens, after which it's not necessary, and so on. So if you think about Kai in the light of bachelor theory, what would you say to that? Well,
there were various things that happened in the October 2015 sessions that struck me as supremely bachelorian, including the conditions under which phenomena suddenly started and then stopped. So I refer Patrick and others to my more recent JSE paper on that.
Okay, and Rosemary is giving an endorsement to both Kluski and Andreessen that there's no evidence that either of them had ever cheated.
And Walter points out, yes, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. One photo shows that Andreessen did cheat on one occasion. Erlander has recently published a new book. Lynn is also saying, Stephen, can you recommend any current credible physical mediums?
I hear good things about Stuart Alexander, and I wish Stuart would work with someone willing to document them, but he has no interest, and I can respect that. So Stuart may be the real thing, but I can't confirm it. I haven't sat with him personally. Yeah, Walter is also recommending him. I think that's one of the big complications, is that whether a physical medium is 100% honest and above board, or uses a mixture of tricks and his own abilities or her own, the profession going, you put yourself in terrible jeopardy by putting yourself in the hands of scientists, especially if you don't know them very well, if you haven't read things that they've investigated before. And it's one of those things that it makes perfect sense for someone, even who is 100% honest as far as they know, to be reticent to get involved with any of us. I can respect that. That's another case. I've tried to give Kai every benefit of the doubt, and I feel as if I've bent over backwards to be fair to him. So, and I spent a lot of time with him demonstrating, I thought, my open-mindedness to him. So, you know, I understand that it's risky for him, but, well, I don't know what to say. Yeah. Yeah, Walter is saying that Kai has ruined a close friendship with Jochen, is it? Jochen. Because of his trickery. Jochen. With me too. I think we had a good friendship. At least I thought we did. Yeah. It's a very complex relationship between people who have abilities in the scientific community, because our agendas are so different, and then you never know exactly who's investigating you. You could be perfectly honest and you're getting a group that are, you know, closet skeptics, and they're going to make their report for Skeptic Magazine, and you never had a chance to begin with. Or you can be in a position where
people who are honest and above board and trying to do the best job still manage to cast doubt on what your profession is.
Right.
I think it's a sad thing that people have to rely on, that the world isn't set up in such a way that people don't have to rely on these kinds of things as a way to make a living, because it psychologically and sociologically and every other way it seems to complicate just the entire thing, their own understanding of what they're doing and what they feel pressured to do, and how we as researchers react to them and so on.
Well, there are some mediums who return the sitters money if they don't produce anything. That's something Kai has not been willing to do. He counts on the income. He's moved from a scruffy, hippie apartment to a really nice condominium with east and west facing balconies, lots of expensive furniture. So the business is treating him very well, and I'm sure he doesn't want to lose that.
East and west facing balconies, you said, I think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Patrick is writing, so let's hang on for that. Oh, Patrick is saying, confounding ordinary explanations of the D-Light affair is Kai's actual petition for photos that then revealed the fraud. How could that be? What motivations could Kai have had in pushing for the photos?
I think it was just arrogance and failure to take seriously that he could be caught. I mean, Kai is often shooting himself in the foot. I mean, the video he showed me of his attempt to test whether the ectoplasm, the cobweb looked like the ectoplasm he produces, didn't help him at all. Various images he subsequently posted online showing him producing the ectoplasm just increased suspicion. Kai often does things that manage to increase rather than decrease suspicion. And, I think he just got carried away with his own success.
I think Steve's having trouble with his connection again, but I think we got the general gist of what he just said. I heard most of it, I think. That Kai has a tendency to kind of test the fates and ends up shooting himself in the foot. So, and motivations are so complex. It's very difficult to see what might be going on. Well, we've gotten to 4:47, so to give everybody a break before we come back for the discussion forum, Steve, do you think you'll be able to join us for the discussion forum at 5 p.m.?
Oh, I'm not sure that I can, no.
Oh, okay. Well, then if anybody else...
Dan, if I can, do I just use this link again?
No, what I'll do is I'll send you the link in an email, so that you can just click that link and come on in. Because I noticed that you didn't actually join the conference as a whole, but I can send you the link.
I have to check with my social director.
In the meantime,
AKA.
we understand. Yes. I understand being the social director over here, so yeah. I know about that. Well, thank you very much for a very interesting talk, and thank you everybody for a great discussion, and Steve for giving us so much time to kind of get into the phenomena and to Kai into your experiences and so on. And we recommend highly that everybody goes out and takes a look on the SSE website and to see if you can find the JSC papers. We'll also be putting up some of the links to the videos and so on into the course materials later on today. So that should be available for you. And of course the chat, I've just taken the chat again, and the chat will be there with all of the links. So you'll be able to go through there and find the live links. So thanks, Stephen, very much, and thank you for everything that you've done for the Parapsychology Foundation's events. We are slowly trying to get everything out onto YouTube so that it's available for everybody else. And as I said before, don't fail to go and find Stephen Braude's YouTube channel. Not only does it have very interesting interviews and videos, but I think there's some music there too, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is. And this is, boy, what a jazz pianist. I mean, you've got to listen to it. All right, well, we'll see you guys back in 10 minutes. 5 p.m. Eastern is the final discussion. Lisette sent her regrets. They lost the connection to the internet. They're having a wind and rainstorm at the moment over there, and they tried to get it back and were unable to do so, so she won't be joining us for the discussion forum, but wanted to say thank you to all of you for coming along, and thank you, Stephen, for agreeing once again to talk for us. And
well, thank you, and thanks to all of you for checking in on this.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I'm going to close it out now, so we'll see you in about 10 minutes.
Hi there, I'm Lisette Coley. I'm president of Parapsychology Foundation, so welcome to our YouTube channel. We have lots to look at, so please check out our videos. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.